It's Pastor Mike responding to a question I received about sin, and aren't all sins the same? You certainly hear that in people's conversation. They say, well, this is, somebody committing this sin, but all sin's the same, we're all sinners. We need to be very careful with that. And though it sounds biblical, particularly from the passage that is often quoted in this regard, that is James chapter 2, verse number 10, which says, if you break one law, you will be held responsible, or you're guilty for all of it. The point of the passage, though, and the context of James chapter 2 is very important. James chapter 2, James is addressing the sin of favoritism, which for them was probably, like for us, seemingly a small sin. And so they thought, well, it's not a big sin, so it was a culturally acceptable sin, and they ignored it. What James makes the point of saying is that you're not sinless. You're still a lawbreaker. Even though you break one sin and not another, you're still sinful. You still have a problem before God, and therefore all sin should be taken seriously. But clearly, the Bible does not teach that all sins are equal. If you go back to the law of the Old Testament, clearly we understand the hierarchies of sin in the way that God sanctions certain punishments for certain sins. I mean, some punishments are more severe than others. Some require restitution. Some are capital offenses. The distinction in the sins that are committed are gradated throughout the Bible, not just in the Old Testament, but even in the New Testament. Though in the New Testament, what we find is an overarching concern for the theological truth that all men are sinners, no matter what kinds of sins that you commit. But we need to realize this for the sake of the future, because there will be a judgment, and we will all face the judgment of God. Christians will face the judgment at the bema seat of Christ, where we'll be rewarded for what we've done, and not all good works will be awarded the same recompense. And so it is for those that are lost, who reject Christ. They are going to be judged at the great white throne judgment, and they will be judged for the deeds that they've done. And not all deeds will be judged the same. Certain sins require certain recompense from God, and other sins require more serious and punitive responses from God. So not all sins are the same. Clearly, the distinctions in sins are maintained throughout the Bible. But in the New Testament, particularly in the book of James chapter 2, the focus is on the fact that no matter what your sin is, it qualifies us as sinners, and we all need the grace of God, and we all need to take sin seriously. But no, the short answer is all sins are not the same, and God does not respond to them all the same, and He doesn't have the same response in His heart or in His law to those sins in the same way. They are different, and it doesn't mean we ever can excuse the small sins. Small sins are still sins, but there is a differentiation in the Scripture.